Good morning, dear friends. Welcome to edition 143 of Ars Boni. Today, I have the privilege to talk with Katarzyna and Antoni Napieralski about the situation in COVID-related issues in Poland from a legal perspective. Katarzyna and Antoni both work at the Department of Innovation and Digitalization in Law, and both of them have a Polish background. Antoni was already a guest in this session, in this series, approximately a year ago on the 10th of April 2020. He was one of the very early guests here, then reporting about Poland. He returns now, which is very kind of him, and Katarzyna is relatively new to the team, which means that she brings an additional input, not only when it comes to subject matters of the things that we do at the department, but also obviously when it comes to information about the situation in their home country, which is, as I said, Poland. So let's have an overview about what's going on in Poland. And it's very interesting to see from an outsider perspective what's happening there, both from the pandemic point of view, but also from legal points of view. There are several issues that are very interesting also for people who are not so much interested in Poland, but mainly interested in the legal development of COVID-19 and its implication. Thank you very much, Katarzyna. Thank you very much, Antoni, for being here. Let us start perhaps by the question, how is the overall situation? And in particular, are there any lockdown rules in place at the moment?
So first of all, thank you, Nikolaus, for having us and for this invitation. Regarding the situation of COVID in Poland, it appears that the situation is currently changing for the better. So at least we hope that it's changing for the better. Poland faced a significant increase in cases and death rate before and right after Easter during the third wave. In the peak of the pandemic, the number of cases reached around 30,000 cases, which is quite significant, and the number of deaths ranged from 600 to even 900 on a single day. But luckily, as I mentioned, it has changed, and we currently can observe a downward trend. For example, last week, Poland recorded the highest daily and weekly decrease in the number of patients with coronavirus staying in Polish hospitals since the beginning of the epidemic. So that's something that really brings us hope that it will develop in this direction. However, indeed, the hospital bed occupancy still ranges from around 50 to 70%. And the main concern that we have now is whether the healthcare system will cope with the number of patients requiring hospitalization in a proper way, whether it can handle it. The lockdown rules that we have in place, so there are still temporary limitations. Some of them changed from today onwards. So before, the whole country was a red zone. And for all of the voivodeships and so provinces, the same limitations applied. However, from today onwards, only in 5 provinces, the red assignments of the state, and for the 11 others, some restrictions have been lifted. This applies to, for example, the education. So the pupils at the primary schools in grade 1 to 3 can right now change from remote education to the education in class. Also, the nurseries and kindergartens are open since 19th of April. There is also, so in general, for all, so those are the exceptions that are applied in the 11 provinces. But for in the whole country, we still have the restrictions, such as everyone has to wear a mask covering mouth and nose. Those masks have to be also carried on in public transport and in the open air, on streets, roads, in town squares. Currently, there is a discussion in the country whether this should be changed, and whether in open spaces we should change the rules, and similarly to as it is in Austria or in other European countries, whether people maybe could resign from using the mask in the open space. Regarding the other limitations, So the hotels are currently closed. The shops, big shops are closed, like city malls and shopping centers. There is an exception for shops such as grocery shops, pharmacies, cosmetics and beauty shops, news agents, etc. But there are also limits on the number of people at those markets, inside the shops and post offices. In the gastronomy, so stationary business activity in restaurants is forbidden. It is only possible to provide services consisting in preparing and serving food for takeaway and delivery. Public transport vehicles may be boarded by a limited number of persons. Public gatherings may be attended only by no more than 5 persons. And the ban on public gatherings, however, the ban on public gatherings does not apply to certain events such as school competitions, 8th grade mock exams, and secondary school final examinations. In terms of the art life, cultural life, the places such as theaters, cinemas, museums, art galleries remain closed. Fairs, exhibitions, congresses, and conferences may be held only online. The events such as weddings, funeral receptions, and other celebrations are also prohibited. I would say that those are the main limitations that are in place in Poland.
I see. Is there any explanation or theory why the numbers decrease, although nothing was changed, or and even on the contrary, some of the measures were released? Is this because of the weather, or is it because of the vaccinations, or is there any other explanation, or is it unclear?
I would say that to some extent it's unclear. I also think that regarding the testing process, in Poland, not that many people are tested. Only people who have the symptoms are directed to be tested, to the test. And in comparison to other European countries where the tests are quite easily available, in Poland, yes, not everyone, I assume that maybe not everyone with symptoms even, or like with suspicion that may have COVID, really takes the test. And maybe that's also the reason why the numbers decrease. But this is only my assumption, personal assumption. So, but I don't know, Antoni, do you have any view on that?
No, that's true with the testing and the low numbers on tests carried out. But I think even if the numbers are not exactly accurate, they may be showing the right trend, right? So there is obviously a decrease, and I think now obviously the situation also in hospitals is improving. Why exactly? Probably also partially because of the vaccination process, as you said, which again, I guess in this whole landscape of the pandemic disaster can be seen as one of the few, at least partially positive points of the government's policy. So I think for the last few weeks, Poland was, when counted the number of doses per number of inhabitants, was rather around the European average. So this was a rather decent pace. Last week was probably a bit of a slowdown, but it's still close to the European average. I think so far about 20% of the adult population received at least one dose, which is quite good. But there is also, of course, another side to this. The rollout of the vaccine program is going very quickly, but this is also partially because there are not so many people wanting to get vaccinated. So it's possible, to move to the next groups of the population even without finishing the previous one with the vaccination program.
Interesting. And is there any debate on whether anything needs to be changed on the regulatory environment when it comes to vaccination, so that people should be forced to get their vaccines or something in that way, or is it?
This hasn't been, publicly announced as a policy option. Also because, well, let's be honest, the anti-vaxxer movement is quite strong in Poland and has been for quite some time already. So I guess the government is counting with rather strong backlash if something like that would have been suggested.
Interesting.
In spite of the recent judgment from the Strasbourg court, right, on that matter, saying that it's in principle permissible.
Yeah, I see. So nothing in this way. Okay. But there are issues with the vaccine in Poland, as far as I read, because at least there's plenty of problems coming now with fake versions of vaccine in Poland. Is this just Western media reporting minor problems, or is this a serious issue?
I would say that in this regard, we just can base our view on what was stated by the Poland's health minister and on the publicly available information. And it has been stressed that with regard to those fake vaccines, that the official circulation in Poland of those was practically non-existent, and that the assumption is that no one have received this kind of shot, so this kind of injection containing fake vaccine.
So according to what you know, it's not really a problem.
Yes, though I would say that this topic is quite fresh as well. So I can imagine that the investigation is ongoing in this regard.
And did it have any impact on the willingness of the population to get vaccinated, as far as you know?
This one, I think not really. I think that there is a really great trust in Pfizer vaccine. People rather had concerns with regard to AstraZeneca vaccine, but the same was present in other European countries, obviously. Though Poland didn't resign from providing AstraZeneca vaccine, and it's up to the patients, so up to the people who would like to be vaccinated, whether they would like to get AstraZeneca or not when it's offered to them.
Okay, I see. Let me perhaps ask: whether there are any interesting, relevant court decisions on the measures as they look like today, or as they looked like several months ago in Poland? So, is there anything that you can report as a development from last year?
So, I think that the fundamental issue that didn't change since we spoke last year is that still there was no decision to introduce a state of emergency or exception, however you would call it. And this is still causing a lot of legal complications. The biggest one of which is that bans on certain forms of also economic activity, closing certain shops or restaurants, have been quite widely challenged in front of administrative courts. Many of those have agreed with the owners of those establishments, saying that the legal basis is faulty, as the state of exception was not introduced. But there is probably an interesting judgment where the court, although in principle agreed that the legal basis is flawed and should not be introduced as it was introduced, in consideration of the overall epidemic situation, it upheld the fine imposed on the, I think it was a restaurant owner or something like this, which is, I think, an interesting way of interpreting the law in consideration of the epidemiological situation.
Yeah, in particular in criminal matters. I mean, if you're finding people without...
I mean, this was not a criminal matter. It was a matter of a fine imposed by the public health inspection. So it was in the field of administrative law. And decided by an administrative court, not a criminal one, but still very, very, very interesting development, I'd say.
Okay, interesting. Question on the university situation and in particular law students. How is their situation at the moment? Is our universities open or are they closed? And is there any perspective in this?
So the most Polish universities have been operating remotely since March 2020, and only a small proportion of classes have been conducted within the walls of the universities since then. Currently, until it's been announced that until 30th of September 2021, classes in degree programs, postgraduate programs should be conducted using distance education methods and techniques, regardless of whether this has been provided for in the program of the given education path. There are few exceptions, for example, for classes whose nature does not allow for remote delivery, as laboratories in medical studies or chemistry studies, or courses that are taken in the final year of studies by the students can be taught as stationary courses, but it's upon the decision of the rector of the institution whether such solution should be applied or not.
And does that have any impact on the way how exams are taken, in particular for law students, or are they taken remotely just as if they were on site?
So definitely there is a change. Some exams has been changed from written exams into oral exams. The written exams are usually offered, or rather prepared on the online platforms, where so my sister, who is like the first year student, told me that in such cases the students have also have to have the camera and sound on to check whether there are any cheating attempts or not ongoing. However, as I know, with regard to the legal education, or rather postgraduate education, with regard to bar exams, those are supposed to be organized, so not remotely, but with the personal presence of the person taking the exam.
So no fundamental change in the way law is taught or how law is assessed, or knowledge of law is assessed.
Not really.
Not really. And okay, interesting. Is there any overview in the literature or on the web that you would ask us or recommend us to read if we need more information about Poland?
I would start maybe with very basic thing with the statistics, because I think maybe from what we've been saying, this wasn't spoken clearly enough, how disastrous the situation was in the last weeks. Because if you look at the statistics of deaths in the last 7 and 14 days, Poland is on the 4th place globally in absolute numbers. So not even proportionally to the total number of inhabitants, but in absolute numbers. It's India, Brazil, and US, and then Poland. And for a country of less than 38 million people, this is an absolute disaster of public policy. And I think this is, something that must be kept in mind when, even in spite of positive aspects like the vaccination rollout program, this is something that should be taken into account.
And what is the political explanation for this, Antoni? Is it that other countries are simply not identifying their death properly, or that there is some kind of specific, I don't know, non-political situation in Poland leading to so many deaths, or is it part of the political debate whether this is politically triggered, and if so, in which direction?
I think the most surprising thing is that this is not really on the agenda of the political debate. So the official line from the government is, we're doing fine, look at the vaccines. But even the opposition is not, for whatever reason, able to bring it to the table as the number one point on the agenda to discuss what's happening.
And there are no medical experts trying to explain this either that are visible in the public arena.
Well, there are, and the most common explanation, and I think also rather accurate one, is that the healthcare system was in a challenging position before the pandemic, which was the result of decisions of many different governments over the last 10 or 15 years. And it simply had less resources to deal with the situation, and numbers of new cases they were not good, but they weren't as dramatic as what resulted then in the death toll. It's just that the healthcare system could not cope because it was under-resourced, understaffed, and so on.
I see. Okay, so read the statistics. Okay, that's a good tip. Okay, and something else apart from the statistics that you would specifically like to recommend?
To make sure that we are aware of the current limitations, maybe the official government website on coronavirus could be recommended to be followed. Also for the students, the website of Polish National Agency for Academic Exchange may give important and send important information for the incoming students on the current epidemic status of Poland. There is also the website of Polish Academy of Sciences in COVID-19, where you can find position statements, publications, and other information provided by the scientists that are working for and or with this institution. I would say that those are the main links, main websites that are worth seeing and reading through.
Perfect, Katarzyna, thank you. And we will put all of them in the show notes below, so you can click on them if you want. Thank you so much, Antoni. Thank you so much, Katarzyna. It was a pleasure to have you here again. I do hope that we see each other again in this series, but hopefully not in COVID-related matters later in a year or so. Have a wonderful day. To all of you who are listening or watching us, have a good day and a good week, and stay connected with us, stay interested, and in particular, stay as healthy as possible. All the best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.